Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I was just reading this article out of the Financial Times. Anyway, talking about how the Fed policy will leave retirees broke. And basically the idea of the article is that as the Federal Reserve's attempt to keep interest rates low, which in turn is giving the ability for the U.S. government to borrow at incredibly low interest rates, is leaving the retirees out there in a very bad position when it comes to a secure fixed income. Because most of the retirees out there, especially the ones who are later in age, older in age, are most likely to try and get into ever more secure investments. Like, they don't want to take on a lot of risk. And the U.S. government bonds have always been like the safe haven place to go. But here's the thing. If you had $1 million in your bond portfolio of 10-year treasuries a few years back at like 5% interest, you would make like $50,000 a year. Not great, but not bad. Okay? So for your entire life, you saved up $1 million. You were able to buy the U.S. Treasuries, have a safe, secure asset to put your money into, and get a fixed income of around $50,000 or so. Now, if you were to get 1%, you would need 5 times more money. That means you would have to have $5 million sitting in the bank, or not sitting in the bank, sitting in U.S. Treasuries, in order to acquire the same $50,000 a year income. So as they keep pushing these yields down, they're forcing the retirees to go even farther out on that risk, going into the junk securities, junk bonds. See, this is creating a very damaging situation for if these companies cannot borrow the money and the interest rates begin to rise, all those bonds that those retirees have purchased are going to start losing value. And they're going to be even in a tighter spot than they are now. Now, something I got to thinking about this, because I was reading a few other articles talking about the stimulus package and how the stimulus package is being pushed by the Federal Reserve, it's being pushed by the president, it's being pushed by all these economists out there. And they're pushing for the government to spend even more because the Federal Reserve cannot drop interest rates beyond the zero lower bound. Now, they could, other countries have, but there's no proof that it actually works, and in a lot of these countries, they pretty much sit in stagflation, where they're not increasing their wages, their property values on a lot of places aren't going up. They can get the stock market to start rising by buying into the stocks. These companies that have zero interest rates or negative interest rates, these countries are not doing well. And so the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, does not feel so inclined to go into negative interest rates at this point. What they really want to do is to have the government spend that money. They'll facilitate the trade. They'll keep interest rates low by buying into the bonds, making sure there's plenty of demand out there for the bonds. And if there's a demand, then the price goes up, keeps the interest rates low, giving the United States the ability to borrow at really low interest rates. And they say, go out there and stimulate the economy. Whether you send out checks to everybody, whether you go into some government spending, whatever it is, get that money out there into the system. And so they tried that. They tried it back in March. When everything started locking down, they said, okay, we got to have some stimulus packages here, get the economy up and moving again. We got to help out all these people who went unemployed. We got all these people who have taken out mortgages they can't afford. Help them out. Push that money out there into that system. And so that's what they did. And the effects of it were almost instantaneous. People started spending it right away, and you saw the V-shaped recovery start to take shape. But now we're hitting a situation again where the economy is starting to flatline again, starting to flatten out, right? Did the V-shaped recovery, an attempt at it, and then it's starting to sputter. All the effects, like they talked, remember before the stimulus package, before the quantitative easing announcements and all that, it was like, they talked about bazookas, they talked about it being a nuclear bomb. That's basically what the Federal Reserve was doing by printing up over $2 trillion and injecting that into the system by the purchasing of bonds and the, all the lending facilities that they set up, the 13 new lending facilities. This was their attempt at firing a bazooka, but instead it was like a huge bomb. Boom, right? They hit the economy with all this money. And it only lasted a couple of months. And now they're talking about how it was not effective and that they need to do even more. Even the president is saying that if the Congress cannot get their heads together enough to vote for the stimulus package, then they'll do it through executive order, which I don't even know if that's legal. But that's the idea. They are so desperate to start this stimulus package up again that the president is willing to act on his own, or attempt to act on his own, outside of Congress, outside of the traditional steps in which that these things would take place. And so now I think about it, it was just like, this really makes a lot of sense when you go to the IMF report talking about how stimulus in an aging population has less effect than when the population is younger. And now, I didn't read the report on it, but I did read the article, the IMF blog, talking about it. And basically what it comes down to is that typically when stimulus gets into the economy, that creates jobs. But we're coming into an older, aging population, where the stimulus is not quite going into a place where there's going to be a lot of jobs being created. Or that the jobs that are being created aren't enough to make up for the fact that the population is retiring and getting into the older ages where you don't work. And what do a lot of these people do with that money? They hold it, they save it, they don't even spend it. So this IMF report dates back to I think they went back to 1985. From 1985 to 2017, they took 18 different economies, and they saw the effects of stimulation through the fiscal policies into the economy had a great effect on younger populations and a very weak effect on older populations, much like what America is experiencing right now. And it makes a lot of sense that the Federal Reserve pushed all that money into the economy through the fiscal policies of the United States government, and it didn't do enough. Took their balance sheet from 3.5 trillion, 3.8 trillion to now close to 7 trillion. And it lasted just a few months. Meaning that the next stimulus package has to be way bigger than the last one was. Or else it's only going to last a couple of months. Monetary policy has run its course and fiscal policy is not working. It really makes me wonder what's coming into the future. Because the government can go and spend all the money they want. The IMF has already shown that it doesn't work. Or it doesn't work enough. Uneducated Economist. I'll leave links down in the description. You guys let me know.